missing someone.
What's up guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Lauren. For those guys who are new, I go by Locks by Lauren on Instagram, and today I have a color correction for you guys. So here is my client. This is the first time I've seen her. She said the blonde on her end, she tried bleaching her hair at home with a box dye. So that's why you can see some pieces that are a little bit more orange and some pieces that are a little bit more blonde, just because the application wasn't probably super even since she did it by herself at home. And you can see her roots. She's about a level 2 and she has pretty thick, coarse Asian hair. So I'm going to be blending her roots and trying to lighten up the blonde a little bit. I don't want to put anything too strong on the ends just because I want to test it out and see how much her hair can handle. So I will be super gentle on them as I go through this process. So today for my client, I will be using some Blonde Me Sports Cough Lightener, and I am mixing that with 6 volume and 20 volume to start off with. And I like to do a lower formula in the back and then raise up my developer as I get towards the top. So my first bowl, I always like to add in some 6 or 7 volume to my 20 vol, because right back here, as the foils get piled on, the hair does process a little bit quicker, because with the temperature of the foils and the body heat right behind the neck, it does tend to process the hair a little bit quicker. So I just, right in the back here, right at the nape and the neck, I do make this formula always a little bit weaker, because by the time I get to the top, I want to make sure that the back bottom isn't ready. So, and this lightener does lift pretty fast in my opinion. So as I get to my next bowl, after I finish with this one, I will be using just 20 volume throughout the head. And so I am doing my signature foliage technique, where I'm just doing some chunky weaves on the bottom. I'm doing this because I want to eventually weave out all of the dark hair. So essentially what this technique will do is, as I'm weaving out these chunky weaves this time, when she comes back in about like 10 weeks, we are going to be weaving all the pieces that I left out this appointment, so that essentially her mids and ends become more solid and she becomes more of a brighter blonde. And it just makes it easier for me to do it that way, so I can do and get my blondes in a single process like this. I don't have to like lighten them twice in the sitting. So I'm just going in, taking very thin sections, making sure that I'm fully saturating. And I opted to use Blonde Me because it does have a really great lift, and we are doing a color correction, so I needed something that was pretty strong but gentle in the hair. So I do